Chapter 15. Though Devon and I had been sleeping together for a couple of weeks, we still usually spent the nights alone, in our own beds. Recently, I'd had a string of disturbing dreams that woke me in the middle of the night, but left me unable to remember exactly what it had been about. After about a week, I was more than ready for it to stop. Another night, another dream. I woke slowly, the remnants of the dream clinging stubbornly to the edges of my mind. I rolled over to look at the clock, 2:30 a.m. Not again. For the last few nights, I've been woken in the dead of night, unable to get back to sleep before my alarm went off. Knowing I had little chance of getting any more sleep, I got up. I figured starting the day a couple of hours early would be better than lying there awake, tossing and turning. After showering, I dressed for work and wandered into the kitchen to fix breakfast. I opened the refrigerator door and peered inside, trying to decide what to eat. Nothing appealed to me. I closed the door with a sigh and flopped down in a nearby dining chair. I sulked for a few minutes, then decided to make muffins. I never had time to make fresh muffins before work, and it would be nice to take some into my boss too. I got up and, pulling out dishes and ingredients, set to work. Later, as I was pulling the first pan of muffins out of the oven and sliding the second in, I heard a knock on my apartment door. I set the timer before going to see who else was up this early. I knew before reaching door that Devon was on the other side, and I was smiling before I opened the door. Even this early, with so little sleep, Devon could make me smile. "What are you doing up this early?" I let him inside and closed the door. "I came up to ask you the same thing. But I asked first, so spill." Something woke me up and I couldn't get back to sleep. I decided to go for a run before leaving for work, but when I stepped out my door, I saw your light on, so I came up to check on you. I flopped down onto the couch before responding. Freaking dream woke me again, and instead of tossing and turning until the alarm went off, again, I decided to get up and do something. "Smells like your something turned out to be cooking." He sat down beside me and set his hand on my thigh. "Yeah, nothing else sounded good for breakfast, and I had plenty of time. I figure I'll take some into the office and share." He sniffed softly. "Almond and something. I'm not placing the other scent." "Almond poppy seed." Devon raised his eyebrows. "Mix or scratch?" "Scratch." He closed his eyes and groaned softly. "You wouldn't happen to have any extra you'd be willing to share with a bachelor living off takeout and his own cooking, would you?" I laughed at the way he poured it on thick. "Have I ever denied you food?" I stood up and reached for his hand. "Come on, I have a batch already done." I pulled him to his feet, and we went into the kitchen. I pulled a stick of butter out of the fridge and set it on the table, then handed a plate to Devon so he could help himself to the muffins sitting on a platter on the table. "I was thinking while I mixed these up this morning." I started. "About what?" Devon asked, peeling the paper off a muffin. "I wondered why we're sleeping alone." Devon looked up from the muffin he was eating. "I mean, we've been sleeping together for a couple of weeks, but we almost never actually sleep together, if you know what I mean." "I get it." He nodded, setting his muffin on the plate in front of him. "I just assumed you wanted your space." I thought about it for a second. "I do, kind of." I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "I'm not ready for the commitment of moving in with each other, but neither of us have been sleeping well. It occurred to me this morning that if you were here, I'd likely have no trouble getting back to sleep." "I guess that makes sense." He picked up his muffin again. "Does this mean you're inviting me to spend the night?" I glanced at the timer, then bent to speak softly into his ear. "I guess it does. Don't bother with pajamas." I smiled as I stood up and reached for the hot pads. I pulled the hot pan out of the oven and set it down as the timer started beeping. I slid the last pan into the hot oven before closing the door and resetting the timer. I have to get up early, he warned. I don't, but I still think I'll sleep better if you're beside me. All right, you're on. I'll bring dinner when I get off tonight. He grinned up at me for a split second. Get off work, that is. I shook my head at him while I pulled the finished muffins from the tin and set them on the platter from the table to cool. After Devon left, I finished getting ready for work, packaging up some of the muffins and taking them into work with me. I had a list of errands I needed to run today, things I'd been putting off all week, for fear of running into Brandon. Since that wouldn't be an issue any longer, I planned on getting them done today. I opened the office and got everything running, briefed the dean on his schedule for the morning. I told him I would be out of the office, running the errands that had built up all week, in case he needed me. I gathered the things I needed to deliver or get signatures on, and left the office with several stops planned. I was almost done with my errands. I'd already stopped at the mayor's office and gotten his endorsement for a construction project on campus, and I'd gone to the nearby city of Safford and spoken with the city manager and mayor about several things. I was on my way to pick up lunch for Mr. Willoughby and myself when I walked out to my car and found another envelope under the driver's side wiper. I looked around, trying to spot anyone out of place or anyone I recognized at all. I saw several people I knew, but they were people who should have been there. I thumbed the lock on the car door and put my papers inside before digging out my PCD. I quickly dialed Rain. "Are you busy?" I asked as soon as he answered. "I'm on duty, what do you need?" I just found another note under the windshield wiper on my car. "Where are you?" "Parking lot of Safford City Hall." "Have you touched it?" I opened the car and put the paperwork I was carrying inside so I could pull out my PCD. Otherwise, I haven't touched anything. "Give me 5 minutes." "All right. I'll see you then." I disconnected the call and leaned against the rear of the car while I waited. A few minutes later, the familiar Safford Thatcher Police Department pickup he drove pulled into the lot. I pushed away from the car and waited while he parked. He pulled into a space just a few cars away and came to take a look. "Hey." I hugged him. "Thanks for coming." "It's no big deal. I don't think there's gonna be anything to find, but I figured it was best if I was here while you opened it." "So you're not going to run your tests?" I asked. He shook his head. "I don't think there's really a point, but I'll do this for you." He pulled the envelope out from under the wiper. His eyes glazed over for a few seconds before he handed me the envelope. "What did you learn?" I took the envelope from him. "Nothing that means anything yet." He watched me as I opened the envelope and pulled the folded paper out. I unfolded the page and looked down at it. It only took me a second to read the 2 sentences printed neatly on the page, but a full minute to process what it really meant. I read the words and blinked, looked up, and without a word handed the page to my brother. "This is your fault. You won't get away with it." He read, then looked up at me. "What does this mean?" I blinked at him, still thinking. "I think this is because Brandon was banished yesterday." "Banished?" "Yeah. Basically, he's not allowed in Bill's territory anymore." I glanced at the watch on my wrist. "He should be gone now. He was given until noon today to pack and leave." "When did this happen?" "From what I heard, yesterday morning." "You heard about Devon's bike, right?" "Yeah, he called me and I took the report." "But what does that have to do with Brandon being banished?" "Devon told Bill about the bike, and Bill determined it was the final straw." "But we can't prove Brandon was behind it." "That's the advantage to pack law over human law. You don't have to have proof." "Of course, that can work against you too." I admitted. "So this is how Bill's dealing with it? Brandon has to leave?" "That's what Karen said." I nodded. Brandon has to leave, he has to find somewhere else to live. Somewhere that's not in Bill's territory. So you think Brandon left you the note? He asked, his voice skeptical. I shook my head. I don't think he left the note, in fact I'm almost certain he didn't. But I think he's probably behind it. I'll bet he never even touched the paper. Bill's had someone following him around during his last 24 hours in town to keep him from starting trouble. They wouldn't have let him leave a note like this. You're right that he's not the one who left it. I'm not sure who it was yet, but I'll figure it out. So what do we do? I wasn't sure if there was anything we could do. You be careful. Watch for anyone out of place or anything that stands out. You fight like hell if someone attacks you. I don't care if they're like you or not, you fight with everything you have. That's what you do. Reassured, I nodded. Okay, I can do that. I can pay attention to what's around me. I can take an active role in my own safety. And you try not to stress about it. It wouldn't do any good anyway. That may be a little harder to accomplish. I know, but you'll manage. Thanks for showing up, I hugged him again. For holding my hand while I opened yet another stupid note. I'm glad you called. There was no telling what it would say. I'd rather take the time than be sorry later. He patted me on the back. Never hesitate to call. Where are you headed next? Back to the office. Other than picking up lunch, this was my last stop. Good to know. You and Dev gonna come by tomorrow and work out? He asked. I think so, if you don't mind. Not at all. I'll see you then. He turned and headed back to his truck, leaving me standing beside the car with the note in my hand. I got in the car and pulled out, not wanting to be left standing there alone.